One of them pulled out a .357 Magnum. He placed it in her ear and he pulled the trigger.
What is it that this country has to do in order to make people feel safe in their own beds in their own homes?
Please, search warrant on the door.
We've got a crime problem. What are we going to do to solve our problems?
You take criminals off the streets. That's how you deal with the problem.
The police tactics would not be tolerated in a white middle-class community.
One day, go to my place.
What's permissible and how should we enforce these laws?
We want to believe that our system has been too lenient, and if we just make it tougher, somehow people will stop committing crimes.
Funding for this program was made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and annual support from viewers like you.
75 reported with 211 suspects in 82.
94th and B, 94th B area of
22 caliber not recovered.
His hands and his arms got real cold, like he was gone.
A lot of lives snuffed out for no reason, just senseless.
Just a lot of violence, life is cheap right now.
Look what's happened to America. We have bars, we have burglar alarms, we have town watches, we have guns, we have enclaves, we have barricaded streets, we have almost the verge of vigilantism. What is it that this country has to do in order to make people feel safe in their own beds in their own homes?
What can we do to reduce the tragic consequences of crime? The damaged lives, broken families, careers cut short, property destroyed. Kids who once fought with fists now kill with guns. We try to fight force with force. We spend $75 billion on law enforcement each year. We fill up prisons and build more. By some estimates, crime in America is a $300 billion industry. Still, the debate goes on. What should we do about crime? What more can we do?
This violence has got to stop. Whatever we can do to enhance safety in the streets of Oakland and every city across this country should be undertaken.
But before we decide what to do about crime, we have to answer more basic questions. What is a crime? What is right? What is wrong? And who decides?
Our children are the ones that are suffering. We need your support.
"300 years ago, America operated under a different set of laws. Religion reigned. Sin was crime, and crime was sin.
The Puritan colonies like Massachusetts Bay were run by deeply religious people who believed that the criminal law should reflect the will of God. So a lot of acts which they felt were sinful were also criminalized. The single most commonly punished offense in 17th century Massachusetts was fornication, that is, unmarried people sleeping together. Other things that were criminalized were idleness, non-attendance at church, and blasphemy.
The Puritan Code reflected its time and values, but 2 centuries of change shattered America's theocracy. By the beginning of the 20th century, the United States was no longer a village society, but a nation of exploding cities, where past sins were sins no more, where factories, not farms, were the main places of employment, and where everyone expected more change for the better.
This was the first time in American memory that so many women had, in effect, had freedom over their lives. It's the development of the department store and the typewriter revolutionized the employment conditions for women, because they had now an occupation that they could follow in the cities. They could be clerks in the department store, they could be secretaries in offices, And women were taking advantage of that. Young women were flocking to the cities just as much as men were. They were going to dance halls, and they were going out on dates, and they were enjoying life in the city. And this just shocked the middle-class America. This was just awful.
But for American men, having a night on the town meant more than just dancing and partying. It might also include a visit to one of America's thriving, though illegal, houses of ill repute.
What the 19th century cared about was flouting society's conventions and morals openly. What you did privately, secretly, was none of the law's concern.
Cities across the United States had long tolerated red light districts, places where the law turned a blind eye to the oldest profession. This double standard is called the Victorian Compromise. But in the first years of the 20th century, one group of reformers, known as the Progressives, decided to compromise no more.
The Progressives tended to be middle-class professionals and their spouses. They were quite prepared to use the power of government to force people to be good. And they really thought, sincerely, that we could reach a condition in this country where prostitution would be eliminated, liquor could be abolished, all of these social problems could be absolutely cured.
This is, on the whole, a middle-class country. It's a country which has a huge middle-class mass, and the criminal justice norms represent the ideas, the wishes, the ideals, and the attitudes of the American middle class, for better or for worse.
The Victorian Compromise is largely what the Progressives put the kibosh on and stopped. Period, say, 1912 to, say, 1916. Almost all of the special segregated districts in the United States were closed. And they were closed by a very simple process. It was illegal already. It was the Victorian Compromise to ignore the illegality, and city council after city council simply instructed the police chief to enforce the law. It was that simple.
Hey, you guys, one day, go to my place.
But it wasn't that simple. When the brothels closed, the prostitutes hit the streets, where they can still be found in every American city. For those who deal with it every day, prostitution continues to be a matter of life or death.
I can tell you prostitution is not a victimless crime. Obviously, AIDS and HIV is being spread by prostitution. We know that. That's documented cases. There's a lot of rip-offs. There's a lot of assaults associated with prostitution. There's a lot of predators out there that victimize prostitution.
You're a male, right?
Once again, society is asking, what do we do? Nevada long ago legalized prostitution, and at least one former police chief, Joseph McNamara, thinks more states should do the same.
And anyone who thinks the police have any serious impact on prostitution is crazy. It's a major problem for law enforcement. It's a lousy area. It's a kind of sleazy area of enforcement to get into. Everyone knows you're not going to have any real impact on it. Why don't we just legalize prostitution? I mean, it's been legalized in Nevada for years. The European countries are much more sophisticated about it.
Okay, guys, we're going to go after the gentleman tonight.
But most police chiefs are taking a different approach to sex for sale. They're cracking down, and many states have toughened their laws. In California, it's no longer necessary to be caught in the act. Just taking what is called an obvious step towards buying sex is enough to get you a night in jail, courtesy of Beverly, an undercover cop.
All right, you want to go to my room? Right over here?
If it was legal, you could use zoning laws, just the way we put nightclubs in certain areas and discos and liquor stores and things like that. But by keeping it illegal, we actually lessen our control over how it operates.
Right now, we're taking kind of our lead from the community, from society in general. What's important to you? What's permissible, and how should we enforce these laws?
Every Tuesday night, hundreds of people gather in this church in Dubuque, Iowa. They come to play bingo and to raise money for their parish. But there was a time, not so long ago, when they would have been breaking the law. Today, when it comes to gambling, not only citizens, but governments are eager to play.
The permissive attitude toward gambling, which is very widespread today, is just, I think, another sign of the general relaxation of standards with regard to what used to be considered vice.
In the 1930s, Nevada, battered by the Depression and hoping to bring money into the state, legalized gambling. The mob seized the advantage and built an oasis of resorts, selling sins not legally available in the rest of America.
It was easy to think that I could go some other place and sin, gamble, and drink and carouse, whatever it might be, and it wouldn't be a part of my life because that was over there in the desert, and not here in Iowa or in Muscatine, where my family and my wife were, and my job and my future. When I was there, I would gamble, and I would gamble a lot. It started with winning a lot of money, and then eventually, of course, I lost money, but I just kept getting deeper and deeper.
Of course, Nevada had been making money out of it for 50 years, and it didn't tempt other states because they said, we don't want that, that's dirty money. But the dirty money didn't look so dirty in the 80s.
In the 1990s, Las Vegas demolished the old casinos to make way for bigger ones with attractions for the whole family, designed to lure customers away from the 27 other states that now have legalized gambling, including Iowa, home to the Diamond Joe riverboat, anchored on the Mississippi. But just 25 years ago, all gambling was illegal in Iowa, even a modest bingo game run by a Catholic priest.
Here's a picture of one of the bingo booths. Every parish around Dubuque, from the time I was a youngster in high school, in the rural areas, had picnics, and usually all of them had bingo. But it all helped to get our schools built and our buses bought. We were grossing up to about $36,000 on a one-day picnic, which lasted from noon until about 10 o'clock at night. But it was an illegality. So this exposition drew the BCI to send 2 officers up in 1971 on the eve before Labor Day. They said, sir, we are represented the BCI. I said, what's that? The Bureau of Criminal Investigation. We understand you're gambling, and it's obvious it's true. I said, they've been doing this for years here. I just have augmented it into where it becomes more profitable because we have many things to pay for that the state does not help us with. The next morning, these things appeared in the Des Moines Register. Church picnic raided, gambling devices were seized, highlights and the sidelights, and they fined me $100, I think was a minimum fine plus court costs. 2 or 3 guys had given me money before they left the grounds that night. They said, whatever the fine is, Father, pay it, and don't forget to have another picnic next year. From right on that time on, we helped work to change the idea. And then, subsequently, the bingo was legalized and kind of tailored for charitable institutions, so that such as we had, picnics could have beer and bingo. However, there's a difference between playing 10-cent bingo with corn on a piece of paper than it is to do what we're really doing now.
And they're off and running in Iowa. It was a day at the races that Central Iowans won't soon forget. More than 5,700 Iowans turned out to see the first race at Prairie Meadows, the culmination of years of work and preparation.
The question is, why is it that the states now are willing to make money off of gambling when they weren't before?
The demand for that gambling didn't come from the public. It came from the industry. It came from the bankers, the chambers of commerce, and the local entrepreneurs. They put tremendous pressure on the politicians to bet the farm so we could gamble our way out of debt and back to prosperity.
Iowa was going through a tremendous agricultural crisis, and they really needed money and revenue. And I think they saw gambling as a method of generating some money for the state.
When you have the state taking what amounts to an addictive or a controlled substance and promoting it, going beyond permitting it to the point where they're promoting it and now pushing it upon an unsuspecting populace, I think you have to call that immoral.
I think it's very difficult to attempt to legislate morality, but you can also legislate so that the temptations and the avenues and the possibilities of immorality might be not so easily carried out.
Obviously, community standards differ from place to place. There are conservative communities and there are far-out communities. But it is important to note that the whole spectrum has shifted dramatically. That even in the most hidebound, conservative, traditionalist community, forms of sexual expression are allowed to be printed and shown that would have been completely impossible in the 19th century.
Today, it's not just the type of message that has changed, it's also the medium, cyberspace. How in our age of global internet can any community maintain its standards and keep sexually explicit material out?
We're on the internet now. You can go to a collection of pages, and this page asks you to become a member of the page. But before you become a member, it also asks you if you want to see samples. And so you can go in and see samples of pornography before you become a member of the page. We're on a page that's just showing women, but you can show, they have pretty much, you name it, they have it. Whatever someone wants, they'll create and put it on the internet.
One of the latest and most controversial trends on the information superhighway is computer porn, where computer users can call up sexually explicit images either through their computer service or a computer bulletin board. But now this new type of pornography is being put to the legal test.
There is a history in this country of attempting to enforce morality through our criminal process. And I think we have to start treating freedom of speech as something which is more important than some other aspects of morality. I think we have to start really cherishing that and respecting that.
Civil rights lawyer Tom Nolan represents Robert and Carlene Thomas, defendants in a case which may establish new community standards for cyberspace.
The Thomases live in Milpitas, California. They operate a bulletin board out of their home. They buy magazines at local stores, which they then scan into their computer. They make membership over the age of 18 mandatory to access the information. They've had the information seized by the local police department, reviewed by the local police department, returned to them with an indication that there was nothing on the bulletin board which was illegal.
So the Thomases stayed in business, selling sexually explicit images. They called their computer bulletin board the nastiest place on earth. But halfway across the country in Memphis, Tennessee, their business came to the attention of Postal Inspector David Durmeyer.
I got a phone call from a man here in West Tennessee in my district. He called to make a complaint, basically about the Thomas's bulletin board. He told me that he saw child pornography on it. You know, in my work, I can't correspond with somebody and tell them, hey, I'm a postal inspector, send me some child pornography. You know, I have to use undercover names and have undercover addresses. Some of them are P.O. boxes, which are, you know, obviously easy for me to get access to.
Postal Inspector Durmeyer's policing of cyberspace follows in a long tradition. It all began with the 19th century crusader obsessed with the elimination of pornography. His name was Anthony Comstock. One glimpse of an explicit image, Comstock believed, could ruin a man for life.
Anthony Comstock was notorious, of course. He was a notorious prude, and he led this massive campaign against vice, pornography, sexuality, and all the rest. And Comstock's crusade was successful in many ways. Congress in the 1870s passed the law, which is always called the Comstock Law, which put the force of the Postal Service in the anti-obscenity battle.
Comstock's greatest concern was protecting children from pornography. The fountain of moral purity in our youth, wrote Comstock, is poisoned by a perpetual panorama of evil forms. Vile books and papers are branding irons heated in the fires of hell.
He got himself appointed as a special agent to enforce the Comstock Act. He was a roving commissioner against obscenity in the mails appointed by the federal government. And he personally made all sorts of arrests dealing with this. I mean, he really had a personal commitment.
Well, we're not talking about going back to the Victorian age. Again, there are laws that seem to have served our country very well with respect to these illegal types of pornography, obscenity and child pornography, and allowing adults to get adult material if they want to.
It's not me or Donna or a citizens group or a pastor or a cop or a prosecutor who decides what's obscene. It has to be a jury of people drawn from the community that sit down in judgment of whether or not something is obscene or not.
To say that the community of Memphis, Tennessee can control the content of a bulletin board in Milpitas is a frightening prospect.
In Memphis, the jurors acquitted Thomas of receiving child pornography, but convicted him of transmitting obscenity through the interstate phone lines. He is serving 3 years in federal prison. But 1,000 miles away in Salt Lake City, Utah, Assistant Attorney General Rob Parrish was preparing another case. He was determined to make the child pornography charges against Thomas stick this time.
Most people think of obscenity as possibly being even a victimless crime or a crime against society or the mores and the morals of society. Child pornography is a different matter because every time an image that shows a child in some kind of sexually explicit pose is disseminated, whether it be through a magazine, through the internet, every time it's downloaded, that child is victimized.
They want to make an example out of us and possibly destroy this information superhighway.
Rather than face a second jury, Robert Thomas plea bargained for a reduced sentence. But to his attorney, there's a larger principle at stake.
Community standards should not be the lowest common denominator in the country. That if somebody wants to access your computer, they're responsible for knowing their own community standards, and the operator of the bulletin board is not responsible.
Those who are using the internet, meaning distributing material, are going to be arguing that this should be a national standard or, maybe even international standard.
You have to understand, if the internet is the communications vehicle of the future, and we think it is, we're very much in favor of a growing, flourishing internet, and the children are the future, then we've got to make sure that the internet and the kids get connected and can grow together.
Of all the things that you see here about drugs, this is where people shoot up, in this filth, and that's where they come to pursue their chance at the American dream. In some filthy, bug-infested, roach-infested, rat-infested house which has no electricity or running water, and they live there. What really gets people crazed is not always the horrible crime that becomes symbolic of a community in decline. What gets people crazy is it's like being nibbled to death by these little creatures, these little duck-billed creatures who are just nibbling you piece by piece. It's the broken into car, it's the slashed tire. It's the burglary of your house. It's the breaking in of your business. It's the petty theft over and over and over again that give you the impression that a community is in decline.
Most of the killings and the frequent drive-by shootings in this neighborhood can be traced to drugs. This corner is a virtual drug supermarket. Instant curb service, open all hours, dealers zigzagging through the streets, stuffing little packets into drivers' windows.
Today, an estimated 70 million Americans have tried illegal drugs. That's 1 in 4 of us. The buying and selling of drugs is a huge industry. Some estimate that Americans spend $100 billion each year on illegal substances.
We haven't learned. We created this $100 billion or so illegal industry by prohibiting these substances. Prior to 1914, we didn't have the black market, we didn't have violence, and we didn't have this kind of corruption. We had a drug problem. We'll always have a drug problem.
But in the 19th century, our perception of our drug problem was different, and so was our response.
In the 19th century, being a drug addict, selling drugs, buying drugs, using drugs, these weren't criminal acts. That doesn't mean that society thought that it was just wonderful if you were addicted to opium. No, they thought it was disgraceful, that you were throwing your life away, that you were ruining yourself, that you were bringing shame and disgrace on your family, and that your life would never be the same.
In 1914, opium and cocaine were made illegal, paving the way for the reform movement's greatest victory, prohibition of alcohol, America's most used drug. The reformers dreamt of an America where all people were sober and responsible, where men spent time with their families, not in bars. What they got were blind pigs, speakeasies, and a host of criminals who became household names, because despite the law, people kept drinking. And so in 1933, prohibition was repealed.
In regard to the national prohibition, most historians would suggest that caused a tremendous upsurge in organized crime. It caused a tremendous disrespect for law that we may never have gotten over. It facilitated whole new consumers into the drinking market. We had all these collateral consequences that were unintended because we had a statute that said no, repress, stop. And of course, the same argument can be made today in regard to the drug laws.
That's him right there on the corner, right there. That's him right there. That's you right there. What's going on? The other hand. What's going on, y'all? You just sold dope to an undercover cop. That's what's going on. That's funny? No.
Why should I work if I'm being paid on the street? I can make $1,000 a night standing on a street corner selling drugs. What am I going to make if I go to school and I go to college? I won't make net in a year what I can make in a month selling drugs on the street. And what are my chances of getting caught? Relatively small. And that's the point.
Doc, come get me out. I got a sales. I sold to decoy. I think that the criminal justice system needs to be revamped because just like you guys just saw, we got one guy that's admitted on camera that he just sold to the decoy, but yet and still his friends drive up and he tell his friends, hey man, I just sold to the decoy, my bail is $10,000, so go to the house and go get a G and bail me out. So basically, in all actuality, they look like this is a joke to them. This is a big joke, you know, but like I told you, I'm putting my life on the line every night when I come out here trying to arrest these guys for narcotics dealing, and to me, it's not a joke. And that's why I definitely think something needs to be done about the criminal justice system to try to keep these guys in jail.
With bowed heads and watering eyes, the city of Oakland buried another one of its children today. This time, 13-year-old Kevin Reed, killed in a drive-by shooting.
Headlines declare crime is down in America. But among juveniles, violent crime rates, especially gun crimes, are moving frighteningly upwards. These crimes are brutal, senseless, and often deadly. Few acts typify these crimes more than a drive-by shooting.
All I know is I heard somebody drop and I heard a girl scream. So we drove back through the area. That's when we seen a yellow tape. So then we knew somebody had died.
Despite the fact that John Jones was not the trigger man, the drive-by was an act of street vengeance committed on his behalf. He had been beaten up, and he and his friends wanted the culprits to pay.
And according to Aaron and Junebug, they were going over there for a fist fight, and the gun was in the car for protection.
So when we came through there, I had intentions upon fighting these people, but it didn't turn out that way.
Suddenly, it's blam, blam, blam from the back seat. Aaron, the driver, ducked. He ducked his head thinking they were getting shot at and almost crashed the car. Tony, stoned, drunk, caught up in the juice of having this gun, sticks his hand out the window and doesn't hold it. And so the gun is bouncing all over the place, and Kevin died from a ricochet.
9 months after Kevin Reed's death, John Jones and his friends were arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Even though he participated in a drive-by murder, John Jones, because he was tried as a juvenile, will be released as a free man on or before his 25th birthday. Had he been tried as an adult, his sentence would have been considerably longer. Across the country, citizens are demanding a change in the law so that kids who kill will be tried as adults.
This man was named Gerald Penn. He was my dad. On the night of September the 16th, 3 thugs came to the produce stand that he was a night watchman at. They bound him, they gagged him, and they beat him beyond death. We had to have a closed casket. These 3 thugs, 16, 17, and a 15-year-old, had planned this all day. Council members, you owe it to this community, to this state, to bring this legislation before, for law-abiding citizens to be protected and to send a message to these young thugs that if they commit crimes of this nature, they've got to pay the price.
The scene from Montgomery City Hall is being played out across the country. Legislatures passing laws to treat juvenile offenders as adults. 100 years ago, that's exactly how they were treated, until reformers changed the system.
The resolution has been adopted.
The children's court, the juvenile or family court as it's usually known, was invented in Chicago in the 1890s by some very progressive reformers. The presumption here was that there was a kind of innocence that attached to childhood.
The idea was to separate out those hardened criminals from those that could be reformed. Well, by definition almost, a kid is not a hardened criminal. And the idea was that if you lumped them together with adults, sent them to adult prison, tried them as adults, that you would simply school them in crime.
The effort here was to create a court which would provide a kind of medical model instead of a criminal justice system model. The judge would serve as a kind of doctor who would dispense this medicine, and he would figure out what it was that the children needed, that they had had bad parents, they'd been raised in a troubled neighborhood, and they would not be convicted in an adult way.
All right, all parties are present. You may call your next witness. When I first came on the juvenile court bench, the bulk of the kinds of cases that we had are what I call kid-type cases, burglaries, auto thefts. Now, of course, the sky's the limit.
We have 13-year-old kids now who are 6 feet tall, who are 200 pounds, who murder. 13! This kid can't even shave yet. They're setting homeless men on fire. They're breaking into old ladies' houses, both men and women, or boys and girls, and they're strangling people for their money. They're robbing people at gunpoint. Why? Because the community doesn't care about their own children.
It means dealing with very troubled kids, dealing with people who live in the margins of society, dealing with people who've lost all hope, with 9 and 10-year-olds who don't believe they're going to live past 18. It's dealing with all of that. And that means making an investment and not simply punishing. And it angers me that we're prepared to punish, but we're not really prepared to do the things that could actually make our society safer.
One town that is trying to make a safer community is Silverton, Oregon. It started a movement to hold parents responsible for their children's crimes. Silverton, a town of only 6,000 people, is the kind of place where a penny still buys time on a parking meter. But the people here believed they were in the midst of a juvenile crime wave. To prove it, Ados Dedele takes us to the scene of the crime.
Over the last 4 years, I've been having problems with these juveniles coming in here and doing all kinds of mischievous things. They've swiped a lot of my tools, $3,500 worth of tools, 4 sets of torches. They've cut up my locks, cut up my fence, and they've just done all kinds of mischievous things. And you know, your fellow feels like wringing her necks, but that's not according to law. You can't do that. So I haven't done that yet.
Ados Dedele not only runs a junkyard, he's a member of the Silverton City Council. When he raised the problem of vandalism, others listened. With juvenile crime rates rising dramatically across the nation, Silverton wanted to break the trend.
The juvenile crime covered the whole range, from assaults and arson to vandalism, theft, possession of drugs and alcohol, everything that is imaginable.
We were concerned that we were going to continue to see our children involved in more serious crimes, and that we were also going to have gang activity in Silverton.
In 1995, Silverton's town fathers created the nation's first parental responsibility law. Passed unanimously, it provides for fines up to $1,000 for parents judged guilty of failure to supervise a child. To outsiders, Silverton doesn't seem to have much violent juvenile crime. Take the case of 14-year-old Scott Whitney. He's not a bad kid, but his mother became one of the first charged under the new law.
It was a Friday night, and Scott came to me and said that one of his friends was going away and that he'd like to go to the party, and I saw, you know, nothing wrong with it, so I let him go.
There was a lot of beer drinking, everybody was outside, and it was dark by then, fully dark, and then all of a sudden a cop came up on foot, 2 cops patrolling. They said, stop, just stop what you're doing, and that's when someone said run, and everybody just took off, scattered, and I took off, and the cops caught me because I was the one closest towards them.
Oh, it was about 2 or 3 hours later, I got a phone call, and the police said, or told me to come down and pick up Scott because Scott had gotten a minor in possession ticket, and that also when I came down that I would be cited for failure to supervise a minor.
What happened to the issue of don't come home 2 hours past curfew?
Under Silverton's new law, parents can be sentenced to attend parenting classes. Sylvia Whitney didn't want to go, so she got a lawyer.
The premise of the law, it purports to give to a judge the right to say, you made a mistake instilling values in your child, you made a mistake raising your child, and therefore you're going to be punished.
The reason I'm challenging this law is I feel very strongly that no one should come into my home and tell me that this is the way you should parent, this is the way that you should do it.
Part of being a free person is raising your child the way you want to. I, as a free person, am going to raise my child and teach them values my way. Well, we can now be punished if our way of teaching values is deemed ineffective by a government agent.
What started as a city ordinance became state law in Oregon, and now other states are passing parental responsibility laws too. In Silverton, even some teenagers think it's a good idea.
I believe that this ordinance will help because hopefully if people can teach their children to respect other people and to not go out and hurt people, that then maybe I wouldn't have to be afraid of what other people do anymore.
But the sad thing is that we need an ordinance to teach parents to teach.
I think we do because I think that, there's just so many things. You can see it in society. The reason things have gotten so bad is because, we've always had a lot of the same laws, but now they're taken totally different. They're interpreted differently. And I think that maybe we need some stricter laws again so people can't just do whatever they want.
The bottom line is we aren't telling parents how to raise their kids. All we're saying is when your kids commit crimes, we want to know what steps you're taking to curtail that behavior. I guess what we're saying is all of us have an obligation in the community to make the place a good place to live.
So far, the law seems to be working. Silverton claims a 40% reduction in juvenile crime during the law's first year.
Even if the law were effective, even if the law reduced the juvenile crime rate by 90%, it doesn't mean that it's a good law or that it's constitutional. One can pass all sorts of laws that might have an effect. One could search everybody as they came into town and, you know, maybe find weapons or drugs or other contraband. One could pass laws prohibiting people from saying nasty things about Silverton. Maybe that would, you know, improve the morale in some sense. But just because a law is effective doesn't mean that it's a good law or a constitutional law. So, in my opinion, regardless of the effect that the law may or may not have, it's still a bad law.
Police! Search warrant! Open the door! Police! 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 Search warrant!
Throughout American history, we have struggled to make our criminal justice system fair to all. It is an ideal that is difficult to live up to.
To a certain degree, the system really comes down hardest on those who are not members of the middle class. That there's a great deal of prejudice, I think, is demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt. I understand that a lot of middle class African Americans talk about the crime called DWB, driving while black. Because they feel that the police target them, pull them aside, question them for no other fault than being black and conforming to a stereotype that blacks are criminals.
I just need to see your ID and I can get out of your face.
I don't feel like I have to show you ID for no reason.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to have to detain you to see if you are popular.
Detain me?
Yeah. I just got to figure out if you're this dude or not. If you ain't him, you can go on your way, dude.
I'm not him. I can tell you that I'm not him.
Okay, I don't know that.
Most crimes are committed by white folks against white folks, and crimes committed by black folks committed against black folks. And yet that's not the image you get when you look at the media. And because they play on fear and ignorance sometimes sells, it's very difficult to educate people about the realities.
You know, this is the second time I've been accused of being someone else. I feel that every time they see me in my car, they're going to keep asking me, am I somebody else? No, I'm not somebody else. I'm who I am.
Minority groups feel, with a good deal of justice, that the criminal justice system doesn't represent them.
That's just what happened to Walter McMillan in Monroeville, Alabama. In 1987, he became the prime suspect in the murder of a popular high school student, Rhonda Morrison. Her body was discovered in the dry cleaners where she worked. The police found no physical evidence or fingerprints linking McMillan or anyone else to the crime, but they built their case around the testimony of Ralph Myers, a career criminal who claimed to have witnessed the murder. McMillan's friends and family testified they were with him at the time of the crime. But despite the alibi, Walter McMillan was convicted in a trial lasting 2 days and sentenced to death. The only thing standing between Walter McMillan and a walk to the electric chair was Brian Stevenson.
I was appalled that he had been convicted on the kind of evidence that they presented. But he was a black man accused of killing a white woman in a very highly publicized case. And I think they did not see him as somebody who had sufficient value to worry too much about whether he was guilty or not. I really believe that for a lot of those jurors, having heard that he had had an affair with a young white woman, they believed, oh, if he's bold enough to have an affair with a young white woman, he's probably bold enough to commit this murder.
Brian Stevenson filed a half a dozen appeals, claiming the police had withheld crucial evidence. But it wasn't until he enlisted the national media that the Monroeville DA reopened the case and eventually dismissed the charges. Walter McMillan had sat on death row for 6 years.
When we walked outside the courthouse door and people began celebrating his release and crying and laughing and jumping up and down, you knew that this case meant more than whether somebody had been wrongly convicted or not. It meant that there might still be some hope of justice, even in a place like Monroe County.
One of the very striking things to me was to go back and find that people who say, oh, when I was growing up on the streets of New York or the streets of Chicago or the streets of LA, that things were safer. They're absolutely right. They were safer. From the 1850s into the 1960s, the rates of violence in this country, in the big cities, went down very consistently. The rate of homicide in New York City in the 1960s was only about half what it was a century before.
A very historic event occurred in the United States in the late 1960s and early 1970s, which was not very well noticed at the time. The rate of violence took a quantum leap in our society. The rate of homicides per 100,000 people went from about 5, which is what it had been for many, many years, to 10, doubled. And what this meant was that the violence that had always been considered a part of life in the urban ghettos of America moved out and became something that was a daily preoccupation of the middle class. And this was very new. Furthermore, it's the kind of fear, the kind of anxiety caused by this that comes right into the house.
In today's America, one of our greatest fears is being gunned down at random by total strangers.
Traditionally, most violence was committed by people who knew each other, members of your family, relatives, friends. But this year, for the first time, we're going to have more murders committed by people who don't know each other. And that's very scary to people because you can't predict it, you can't control it.
He just pulled the trigger and the baby fell to the side. And then he took off. I told the police, he shot the baby, he don't shot the baby, and they went following behind him.
This year, one American will be murdered every 22 minutes.
First graders quietly gathered outside. They watched as the flag was lowered to half-staff in memory of 6-year-old Chantel Warden, their classmate who was shot in the head Monday and died yesterday.
If you have a crime with these elements, randomness, innocence of the victim, perpetrator who winds up to have been involved in the criminal justice system, then you almost are guaranteed a news media firestorm about this crime. And that this is going to be something that people are going to say, how could this have been allowed to happen? The newspapers will go crazy with it, the television will go crazy with it, and the politicians will feel we have to respond. We must do something about this.
You know, what politicians are offering to America now is, they're basically saying is after you've been raped or after you've been robbed or after you've been murdered, we're going to really be tough on the person who raped, robbed, and murdered you. And we're going to beat them up good. We'll put them in prison, we'll execute them, we'll put them in chains, we'll even whoop them if we can get the law to allow us to do that. What they're not saying is how we can actually prevent people from being raped, robbed, and murdered.
Levon Scalius never thought that she would be the victim of a violent crime until one night of terror for this single parent became an 11-year ordeal. What began as a heinous but familiar crime ended with a new law in the books in the state of Texas.
I'm asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning and I hear breaking glass. I'm thinking, what is going on? And I flip on this hall light. And I'm standing just right here under this hall light, kind of like this. My daughter's room is here, and her little bed is against this far wall and window, and this door is open. But I see this young man with a burr haircut coming at me at an angle like this, and I'm standing frozen in fear, just like this, thinking, who is he? I've never seen him before. Where did he come from? I told him audibly, you're out of place, you don't belong here, but it was too late. He had the knife under my neck. He said, if you go to the police, I'm gonna rape your daughter in front of you, I'm gonna kill her in front of you, and then I'm gonna rape you and burn the house down.
Okay, what's the problem, man? Okay, they're on their way, don't hang up.
It would take more than a year, but ultimately the criminal justice system tracked down Levon's rapist, Lanny Gene Bevers, a 20-year-old Army private. He was tried, convicted of rape, and sentenced to 20 years in prison.
My little daughter was no longer in this room. She had now become a preteen, and she was in this room. The doors, like I said, were shut. I had added a lock to this bedroom door, and all he did is just kick it in. And he sprang and landed right here on this corner of my bed. I could see him pull the hammer back. The gun was cocked, ready to fire, and I thought, this is it. I felt this was Lanny Jean Bevers Jr. coming back again to redo the 77 assault, only worse this time. This time he's going to kill me. Then he's going to kill my daughter, and then he's going to burn our house down. All those things went flying through my mind.
What LaVon had known was that Lanny Jean Bevers had been released after serving only 6.5 years of his 20-year sentence.
And like deboning a chicken, he just slashed 3 times real quick through my hand. And it started at the wrist. He started cutting, and he'd come up through the hand, because he held me in a vise, and just cut through the hand and then back across. And all I could think is, I just want to bite him. I want to kill him. I was so enraged, and yet I couldn't do anything but stay docile because of my daughter and because I didn't want to lose my life. And I knew if I hurt him, he would kill me. I didn't know what to do. All these thoughts were, I'm out of control. I have no control. He's the only one in control here.
Although LaVon told the police Bevers was her attacker, there was no evidence to link him to the crime. To LaVon's disbelief, the police filed charges against another suspect. When that case was dismissed, LaVon's telephone began to ring.
I do not wish to hurt you. Understand this.
You've already hurt me.
Please. I do not wish to harm you.
Well, who are you?
Unlock the door and leave it unlocked for tonight, and we will resolve this problem.
LaVon had not only been raped twice, now she was being stalked. But in Texas, stalking was not yet a crime, and no one could do anything about it.
Under state law at that time, stalking was not identified as criminal behavior, and to follow and harass and annoy and torment and absolutely terrorize was not taken seriously by law enforcement.
But stalking was in the news. In Fort Worth, where a gunman killed his ex-girlfriend, and in Los Angeles, where a stalker murdered Rebecca Schaefer, the young star of TV's My Sister Sam. And even bigger celebrities were being stalked.
Madonna, with the security that she has, still has a stalker. David Letterman, with tremendous security in his home, found this woman in his home constantly and on his grounds. She would be released and would show up in his living room. She would be released and show up in his bedroom. And so that brought the initial awareness to the American people that this phenomenon existed.
In my mind, this is the quintessential kind of crime. I mean, there are a very small number of people who love violence. I mean, they love to visit violence on other people, and they're animals.
Unlike celebrities, LaVon Scalias could not hire security guards. She turned instead to the Fort Worth District Attorney's Office. Wasn't there something that could be done to stop her stalker?
District Attorney said, if we don't do something for this woman, she's going to be dead. So we're going to go ahead and do whatever we have to do to put whatever resources we need to put into the case to try to convict him.
With no law against stalking, the only way to save LaVon was to convict her assailant of the second rape. That required some ingenious detective work.
We went out to the police department and just went through all the evidence, and in the evidence was one of these old metal Zippo lighters. It had been fingerprinted on the outside, and no fingerprints had been recovered. Alan, being a former smoker, knew how these Zippo lighters worked and said, well, let's pull the tank out and fingerprint the tank. And that's exactly what was done, first by the Fort Worth Police Department and then by the FBI. And lo and behold, 2 fingerprints were recovered off of the tank, both of which matched up to Mr. Bevers.
It wasn't until 1988, after 4 years of terror for LaVon, that Lanny Jean Bevers was convicted for the second rape. He is eligible for parole in 2005, But the story doesn't end here.
Jane, the stalking information about the number of stalking events, have you found any information about that?
Next thing I know, I'm hearing from Brian McCall in his office, and they're saying that he is authoring a bill, anti-stalking. Would I be willing to let him tell my story and use it to help with that legislation to get that bill passed? Because I thought, well, I should have been, more aware that this individual was dangerous.
LaVon appeared on television, at first concealing her identity. As she gained confidence, she came out of the shadows to campaign for a law to define stalking and make it a punishable offense.
This bill puts the people who have been the victims of stalkers back in control. And now it is the perpetrators of the crime who are going to be stalked by law enforcement.
Because LaVon was willing to go public, the citizens of Texas are now protected by an anti-stalking law. She is a living example of how America's laws are shaped not only by its people, but by the times in which they live.
Every year in the United States, there are 35 million crimes committed. That's everything, from the guy who borrowed your lawnmower and didn't return it to contract murder committed by a mafia hitman. Okay, that's the whole thing. Of those, maybe 25 million you could consider serious to the extent that they involve violence or the theft of a large amount of property. Of those 25 million, a bit more than half are reported to the police.
They don't catch but a small percentage of the people where crime is reported. We don't convict but a small percentage of people we bring to trial. We don't incarcerate, yet but a smaller percentage of people who are actually caught, tried, and convicted. So what are we talking about?
It's one of the central things that I think people don't understand about criminal justice and that I really think everybody should. It's what the statisticians call the funnel.
We are capable to overburden and overwhelm the rest of the criminal justice system, and we've proven it time and time again. There's not enough judges, there's not enough courts, there's not enough prosecutors. And society's got to be asking themselves, is it worth it? Are we willing to jail and incarcerate 5, 10, 15% of our population? And I think the answer is probably no.
3.5 million Americans are in the criminal justice system. 1.5 million are behind bars. California spends more money on prisoners than on higher education. In our fear and anger over crime, we're making prison sentences longer and prison life harder. But to what effect? In the history of American crime and punishment, no question is more troublesome than what do we do with the guilty? What price should the criminal pay? Throughout history, lawmakers have offered very different answers to that question. Punishments have gone up, down, and sideways for the same crime. Burglary was once punishable by death, and so was rape. Why do punishments vary so? Why do they change? As society changes, as society's goals, ideals, and attitudes change, the punishment it inflicts also changes. In 1736, the Massachusetts Assembly ordered that a thief on first conviction be fined or whipped. For the second offense, he was to sit on the gallows or platform with a noose around his neck and then be whipped 30 times. For the third offense, hanging. 3 strikes, and you're dead.
The colonial theory was that society, the community, healed you. You were whipped in public, and your neighbors watched, you should be ashamed of yourself, and you will reform because you have been shamed. So the community is what's curing you of your criminal propensities. In the 19th century, they just thought that doesn't work. In fact, quite the opposite idea got hold of people's minds. They thought the community isn't what's curing people, the community is what's making them go bad. And so their solution was radically different from the colonial solution. It wasn't to rub people's noses in society, but to remove them surgically from society, to lock them up totally in utter isolation.
In the colonies and throughout Europe, prisons housed people awaiting punishment. They were not yet places of punishment. Penitentiaries didn't exist. They were an American invention.
The prisoner who came into the penitentiary was stripped of all his individuality. He put on a uniform. That was an innovation. His hair was cut, and he was led to a solitary cell in this giant, gloomy building. And in that cell, he was to spend the rest of his time without speaking a word to another human being.
At the turn of the 19th century, the Quaker designers of the penitentiary system believed that by removing the deviant from the corrupting influences of society, leaving him with only a Bible and his God, he would eventually become penitent. It was a bold experiment, attracting worldwide attention. In 1831, Alexis de Tocqueville, sent by France to study America's penal institutions, wrote,
"Nothing less than the safety and future stability of the Republic is at issue. The triumph of good over evil, of order over chaos."
Charles Dickens, on the other hand, thought the penitentiary absolutely inhumane.
In its intention, I am well convinced that it is kind, humane, and meant for reformation. But those who devise this system do not know what they're doing. I hold this slow and daily tampering with the mysteries of the brain to be immeasurably worse than any torture of the body. Those who have undergone this punishment must pass into society again morally unhealthy and diseased.
But the price the prisoner had to pay became less a concern than the price society was paying for the one-man, one-cell approach to reform. To reduce the high cost, some prisons in the mid-19th century abandoned the solitary system. Others brought inmates out of their cells and put them to work. In some states, the cells became mobile cages and went where the work was.
A number of states had experimented with leasing out their convicts. It's an idea that's very attractive. Instead of spending state money on these people, let them make money for the state. The mortality rates in some of those gangs, including the chain gangs, was astonishing. Sometimes as many as 1 out of 5 would die every year. And mind you, you're talking about healthy young males. The South didn't care. The white South didn't care.
But in 1932, Hollywood brought to the screen the best-selling account of a white man's experience of the brutal life on the chain gang.
Come on, get up. I was just wiping the sweat off my face, but you got it knocked off.
The public outcry it produced finally led to the abolition of chain gangs for over 50 years. Now chain gangs are back. Alabama was first. Arizona and Florida have followed suit. In 1995, Ron Jones made his first purchase as the new Alabama Commissioner of Corrections. With $17,000, he bought 375 sets of chains for parole violators. He took away all their privileges and put them to work.
The chain gang, in retrospect, also became that proverbial line in the sand that in Alabama, we were through treating our prison system like an entitlement program. We were going back to our historical norm of running prisons as prisons.
On television and radio programs across the state, the public wants toughness, and the chain gangs deliver.
And I think the chain gang, if it proves to be a deterrent, if it keeps one kid from committing a crime, it's worth it.
It sure is. And I'm for that caning.
Well, our nice liberalized ways of treating criminals has not worked.
Well, wait a minute. Let's use our brains here. You know, we've got a crime problem. What are we going to do to solve our problem? Stick people on rock piles? Like, I'm sorry, but that's not going to work. And nobody thinks it's going to work. Why people want it is because they're angry, they're fed up, and they're looking for simple solutions to complex problems.
I don't know if you've watched the news last night. I did, and saw there was, and I wish I could remember the woman's name, Bronstein or something like that. I wish to heck, and I almost said something else,
Yeah.
This woman would pack her bags and go back wherever she came from.
Probably New York.
Rhonda Brownstein isn't from New York. She's from Philadelphia, and she's not about to pack her bags. Working as the senior staff attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center, Brownstein leased a class action suit on behalf of all the chain gang inmates. The suit demands the immediate abolition of the gangs on the grounds that they violate the inmates' Eighth Amendment protection against cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, they're claiming that it's cruel and unusual to work inmates in chain gangs. We've already litigated one case on the chain gang in federal court in Alabama, and that case was thrown out by the federal judge two months ago as being frivolous. The judge told the inmate in no uncertain terms, you have no right not to work in prison, and there's no law that prohibits you working in leg irons. There were a few things that we cut out for all inmates early last year, 1995, cable television. We cut out free coffee except on Sunday. As a tobacco allowance, we cut that out. The main program I cut out was sex offender program. I cut it out way back last year. The way the program was set up, the way it operated was not cost effective.
That scares me, that people who have such a sick problem as to sexually abuse children and other people would not get the treatment they need. So they're going to get out of prison. We know they're going to get out of prison. There's no doubt about that. And here they've had absolutely no rehabilitation. I think that the citizens of this state should be outraged at that.
Punishment doesn't deter crime. Look, most of your criminals who are in prison come from your streets. You offend a criminal in the street and he'll kill you. He'll pull your nails out. I mean, you know, it doesn't deter them. People only improve themselves because of expectations. When you take it away, that's when they become destructive, either to you or to themselves.
Wilbert Rideau, serving a life sentence for murder, experienced that hopelessness at Louisiana State Prison at Angola. Now as the editor of the country's only uncensored prison magazine, he goes about his reporting in the relative calm of the prison grounds. But Angola wasn't always this way. In the 60s and early 70s, Angola had no magazine, no programs, vindictive guards, and a hopelessness that bred violence.
It was a jungle. A strong rule and the weak either serve or perish. And when I say serve, I'm talking about serve as slaves, literally. You had to buy protection. This place, it was a dog-eat-dog jungle, quite barbaric.
The only protection you had was force of character and cold steel. Picture the most mega macho society, femaleless, childless society, full of adult young males playing playing out their testosterone-driven, macho characteristics. And that's what Angola was like. And there was no brakes. There was no control. The penitentiary was literally on the verge of going out of control.
Tonight, I am the hostage here. Surrender peacefully. You will not be harmed.
Some prisons did go out of control, and none more violently than the New York State Penitentiary at Attica. For 4 days in 1971, the inmates rioted until state troopers stormed in and regained control of the prison. The result? 42 dead and a newfound willingness of federal courts to enter boldly into the management of prisons. The repercussions would be felt from New York to Louisiana.
Okay, welcome to Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola, Louisiana. You have arrived.
The federal court ordered the state of Louisiana simply not to do anything different. They told them to follow your own laws. Your own laws say you're not supposed to let people kill other people. Your own laws say, you're supposed to provide people medical care. The state laws, it wasn't federal laws, it was state laws.
The court came in and ordered us to run a constitutional prison, and at that time they spent a lot of money here, and at that time the prison, made a great turn. This is the largest maximum security prison in the land. It's a safe prison. It's unheard of in some areas. My 15-year-old plays and rides his horse with inmates that are rapists and murderers out in the field. I wouldn't do chain gangs because, here's my answer to that, and you may think it's corny, but if I put my inmates in chains, they would drag down all the okra and all the cotton and all the corn, and they couldn't be efficient picking. I have gun guards. I have people on horses with guns, and if you run, we shoot. We shoot a warning shot, and then we shoot you.
Don't tell me about what Burl Cain. I don't care who Burl Cain is or what he does. But I'll tell you, in Pennsylvania, the prisoners are in charge of the prison. We had drug gangs running in prison. We had smuggling in prison. Because who do you have in prison? You have all these murderers and garroters and molesters and rapists and predatory. And you have two guys who are guarding 300 prisoners with a whistle. Now, what are you going to do when you're in a prison with 300 murderers who will kill you as soon as look at you, and they do have the capacity because they have homemade weapons, and you have a whistle? Yeah, I'll tell you where they have control of the prisoner, where every single prisoner is in his cell 23 hours a day, and sometimes 24, and he or she is alone in his cell.
Frustrated by inmate violence and the belief that they could do little to reform convicts, prisons are resorting to 23-hour lockdowns. At California's Chadderjian School, that's the treatment new arrivals get, until they earn their way out of their cells through good behavior. But unlike the prisoners at most lockdown facilities, these young men were convicted as juveniles.
By the time they've come here, they've probably at least failed 2 or 3 of our other youth authority programs. We get very few of them that come straight from the clinics or the courts to Chad. And these have all either assaulted staff or exhibited extreme violence in other institutions.
I'm here for carjacking. I'm a violator. I've been here before. I did some time. I pulled 5 years straight, and then I got out and I came back.
I'm a sergeant here, and I'm also the gang coordinator. And my position here is all the different inmates or wards that come inside the institution, I catalog them. They come to me, they show me their tattoos, or they show the staff the tattoos, and we make a gang data sheet on them.
Sureño means I'm a southerner from down south. The sur is for prison, if it's a prison gang inside. The outside, I'm from a barrio, which is in Orange County. In jail, my prime enemy is the north. On the streets, a lot of different enemies.
It was Crip blood when we first opened, a lot of that, and we still have North-South. North-South Hispanics, it's a problem every day.
Just words will do it. Sometimes a look will do it. To mad dog, overlook somebody, to stare at them just a little bit longer than you should be staring at them.
If you go ask one of them right now why they do it, they'll tell you, we don't know, we just been doing it so long. My dad did it, my granddad did it, my uncle did it. It's just family tradition.
My gang is my family, but as you get older, which we call veteranos, It's time for the youngsters to do the gangbang, put in the work, do the killing, whatever.
This weapon here was made specifically for one staff in mind. He was upset at one of the staff members, so he had set in his mind that he was going to use this, but before he could, we found it.
That's the real thing.
And what is that used for?
It's a 37 gas gun. Lock and load, fire. I'll clear a day room. I encourage the use of gas. I do not want staff being hurt by physically intervening till the situation's under control.
These guys here are on a modified program, which means they're either in a group disturbance or they stab somebody, and they do 23 hours in this room and 1 hour rec. That's if they act right. If they don't, they get a shower and they go back in there. And so slowly we integrate them back into the program, but they have to earn their way out.
So the food comes in this door.
You have to be like this and facing the wall like this, because they don't want you watching them when they pass the trays in. When they open the door, they slide it in like with a broomstick handle. Then once they close the door, you can get up and get the tray. And you usually have about around 5 minutes to eat. People think, oh, these people out of control, just lock everybody up. And I felt I was not the type of person. I was the type of person who I did my fair share of wrong things, but I'm not a person that's not above redemption. That cannot be saved. That cannot be converted and become a new person. This is where I keep all my certificates at that I earned in here, from the counseling groups and from the school area. And I'll show you a couple of these. Social thinking skills, and these right here in warehousing.
They do have a lot of good programs at CYA, but all of the kids can't get in the programs who need to get into the programs because there's too many kids there. You're trying to get them rehabilitated, even when you send them to CYA. And you want him to get into the programs that are most likely to rehabilitate him.
Owens, bring him up.
But whether they get what they need or not, the line moves inexorably out, finally putting every one of these offenders back on the street.
To get them out early, to have a parole tail on them, to do drug testing, to have some kind of hold over their activities. That's the best of both worlds. 25, they walk out, they have no jurisdiction, they have no confinement time, and we have no control over where they go, what they do, or when they do it. They're out there, they're a free person.
How can we release convicts so that they won't victimize us again? That question has confronted American society ever since criminals were first incarcerated. At the turn of the century, penologists thought they had the answer.
They felt that the prison system wasn't working. And so they had the idea of the indeterminate sentence. If you commit a crime, you go to prison and you stay there as long as is necessary. And if you show that you keep your nose clean, you can go out, but meanwhile, we'll be observing you in prison. So it was a much more administered, individualized system of justice.
You could be released after you've served 1/3 of your time. And it's the parole board that decides when you get released.
Some states offered other inducements to good behavior, like weekend furloughs away from the prison. These supervised release programs, like parole and probation, help prison officials separate the good from the bad and maintain control over the good as they slowly readjusted to the real world.
As with parole, furloughs do work. There is research in Massachusetts showing that the rate of recidivism on the part of those who have had furloughs before release is much, much lower than the rate of recidivism on the part of those who have not. And there does not seem to be much question about this. The problem is, of course, it's not 100% effective.
And that's why people think that parole and probation is a joke. They don't see it working. They see it's a do-gooder, bleeding heart way of turning those guys loose. You want to care more about the comfort of a prisoner than you do about my safety. I'm paying the bill, these people are saying, and you want to loose these people on me. And when a person is released and quickly thereafter commits a crime, there is hell to pay.
What did the Democratic governor of Massachusetts think he was doing when he let convicted first-degree murderers out on weekend passes?
Willie Horton not only caused a media firestorm in Massachusetts, but then this got picked up and used by the Republicans in the 1988 presidential campaign.
Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend.
Bush's campaign ads not only helped him win the presidency, they also etched the image of Willie Horton and the revolving door into the nation's consciousness. The effects of these TV commercials and the fear they generated were immediate and profound. Beginning with Massachusetts in 1988, 6 states curtailed their furloughs and 9 states abolished parole. The elimination of these programs was part of a rush towards tougher and longer sentences.
But you have to ask the question, if because there is one Willie Horton, you get rid of the furlough program, and you say that the next 1,000 people coming out of that prison are not going to have furloughs, are you really making life safer for people in Massachusetts?
Throw away the key is short-sighted. You want to make longer sentences, that's fine. That's fine if a person deserves that, but we still have to deal with them inside, and you still will eventually get out into the street, and we have to address it.
You want now to punish me. You don't want to help me change. You don't want me to help me see anything. You want to punish me. How long should I be punished?
You're saying we're going to warehouse these men, we're going to make these men, in a lot of instances, angry for being treated like animals for so long, and then we're going to return them right to the community the same way or worse than we took them out.
The only rehabilitation is moral rehabilitation, and our statistics are going to show. We know already if you leave here with a college degree that you got in prison, you're 97% chance of being successful.
In 1972, Congress passed a law providing federal grants to low-income people seeking higher education. The Pell Grant, as it was called, was available to prison inmates. But in 1995, against the advice of most prison administrators, Congress eliminated Pell Grants for all inmates.
But as a prison administrator, that is something that we saw was a good control mechanism. Management, these college students did not get in trouble, and I knew that many of them went out on the street and got good jobs. So there was a value for that as far as we could see inside.
You know, most people are going to come home from prison sooner or later, no matter how long they want to keep us here. We're going to go home. So it might not be 10 years, it might not be 20 years, but you're going to go home. Who do you want to be your neighbor? Who do you want living next to you? I would rather have a person who worked really hard, got an education, possibly came out with a master's degree, and has hopes of trying to make a life better for himself and for his family than someone who sat around for 20 years, maybe just playing basketball or lifting weights and not having the opportunities to grow.
And what are you going to do with us? Okay, you don't have to worry about me, I'm through. But there's a whole bunch of youngsters you're sending in here for 15 and 20 years. You want to take their weight pile, you want to take their Pell Grants. You'll deal with them later. You know, pay us now or pay us later. Yeah. You got it to deal with. And you can go to bread and water if you like. The bottom line is these animals are coming back out there.
I think that we have, and I know I have, given up on the whole concept of repentance and reformation. I am hoping that people who are going to prison are repentant and are going to become penitents and reform. But I realize this is not within my power. This is solely within the power of the individual.
I don't think it's worth giving up what is a historic commitment this country has always made to rehabilitation and crime control, as opposed to this old expressive vengeance and retribution. And I mean, it's just too important a value for us to sacrifice without, I guess my problem is I feel like we're getting ready to sacrifice it. We are sacrificing it without even thinking about it very much. And maybe it's not worth saving, but it is sure worth thinking about.
But few of us ever think about rehabilitation versus retribution, or anything else about crime and punishment, until we are forced to by events beyond our control.
They came from the driveway down here. They came in alongside of her car. As she went to get in, they pinned her between the car and the motorcycle. She couldn't move, demanded her purse. She wouldn't give it to him, and with no warning, no options, one of them pulled out a .357 Magnum. He placed it in her ear and he pulled the trigger. The young man that Kimber was with, the young man, got out of the car. He came around to the side and he tried to stop this from happening. And just as he got to the back, he saw the flash from the gun. He went over to the windows and started pounding on the glass for help. This is Kimber's teddy bear ever since she was a tiny little girl. And his name is Cole. And to this very day, as smushed and as crushed, and maybe even a little bit dirty, but that's Kimber dirt.
The victim might have been just another anonymous number in the records, except for her parents. She was Kimber Reynolds, shown in this home video made at a wedding the day before she was murdered. Her father, a professional wedding photographer, made a vow: the kind of people who killed her would not be back on the streets.
I'm the kind of guy that never put a bumper sticker on my car or somebody's political sign out in my front yard. I basically tried to stay apolitical, if you will, and kind of stay out of the fervor.
Welcome back to KMK.
Mike Reynolds, though still racked by grief, immediately set about finding the two killers.
The day after my daughter's murder, I probably did the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. And I went on a talk radio show.
A listener who knew about the killing called the police, who rushed to the suspect's apartment and surrounded it. There was a vicious exchange of fire.
And he came out shooting. The first shot out of this man's gun hit one of the officers square in the chest. The other 3 officers returned fire. They fired every shot they had, including the 2 clips they carried with them. And when the smoke cleared, it was a different story. This time he wasn't shooting it out with an unarmed 18-year-old girl. The second man was caught 2 weeks later by an officer whose wedding I had photographed. They took this man into custody. He was prosecuted, he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 9 years in California prison, of which he only serves 4.5 years.
Mike Reynolds decided the punishment wasn't enough. He proposed a 3 strikes law that would put away 3-time offenders for a minimum of 25 years to life.
I would rather not do it. I wish somebody else would. As a matter of fact, the very people that we have elected to do this, the people that we are paying to do this, the people that are responsible for doing this, the people in those think tanks that have developed and disseminated and proposed and enacted the very laws that are supposed to do this, obviously are not doing this. If they had been doing, if whatever they had proposed had worked, if the system was working, we wouldn't be having this little conversation right now. And I wouldn't have a dead daughter, would I?
Kimber Reynolds' legacy would be one of the toughest 3-strike laws in the country, one that would count any felony, not just a violent one, as the final strike.
The real hurdle here is getting the 500,000 signatures necessary to get this onto a ballot.
In California, a law can come into being through a citizen referendum, but it takes 600,000 signatures just to get it on the ballot, a number that might have been insurmountable, except for a tragic discovery 40 miles to the north of San Francisco.
There was a little girl up there who I'd never heard of, and they had been searching everywhere for her, and they just found her body. And the person that led them to the body was a repeat felon and apparently fit the description of the kind of law that we were trying to put forward.
The suspect was Richard Allen Davis. The victim, poly class.
But there was something that was different about this little girl that motivated people. Folks read about in the paper, see it in the news every day about another tragedy. But what this little girl did is she got people out of their chairs, got them to pick up those phones. This was an emotional evening. When we actually submitted, we submitted 841,000 signatures. It was the fastest qualifying initiative in the history of state of California. 2 years ago, the governor of California signed the first 3 strikes bill into law.
One of the first to be tried under California's 3 strikes law was Anthony Garcia, a man with a criminal history of drug use and theft. Only 1 month after the law was passed, Garcia was caught on surveillance cameras, stealing $235 worth of jeans and shirts. He was apprehended before he left the parking lot. When Anthony Garcia was arrested, he expected the usual short sentence he had grown accustomed to. A few years behind bars before returning to his family.
I never thought I could really win the case, that people would say, gee, I didn't see what I saw on the videotape. But I did think that there would be 1 or 2 people that couldn't abide that conviction.
What do you recommend on doing this thing? With this case, trying it?
Under California's new 3 strikes law, public defenders like Susan Bernardini face off against prosecutors who get to call the strike zone. The district attorney's office decides which prior convictions count as strikes. And for those with prior convictions like Anthony Garcia, the DA can charge a misdemeanor as a felony.
It's a petty theft. It can be charged as a misdemeanor, even in this state still. And this prosecutor's office chose to charge it as a 3 strikes case. I mean, that's a lot of discretion. That changes the case from a misdemeanor that can be tried in a day to a felony that strung out for a year and had a jury trial.
The jurors deciding Garcia's fate were told nothing about the defendant's prior convictions. Therefore, they knew nothing of the possible 3 strikes penalty. They were asked to determine one thing only: had Garcia committed the theft?
I began to get uncomfortable, or I guess curious, about the whole process when I realized that they had the whole crime on video. So I couldn't understand it. There was days involved, a lot of people involved, and it didn't make sense to me because obviously the guy had done it.
If you tell the jury about this 3 strike stuff, number one, you're risking a potential reversal based on the juror thinking, oh, this must be a bad person, therefore I'll find that the facts are true. And number 2, in a relatively minor case like this theft was, they're going to say, oh gosh, the consequences are so huge, whether the facts are true or not, we're just not going to convict him.
I was forced to be as creative as I could be. I had to think of some way to reach that jury. For instance, they could not know this was anything but a petty theft. They had to know from me, somehow, without my saying it, that it was. What was I going to do about that? And I made eye contact. I mean, it was the only thing I knew how to do. I looked at each one of the jurors. I looked to see what face was looking at me for information and looked right back and said, you know, the decision, and I said it slowly. I remember that, saying it very slowly, looking at each one of the jurors, that the decision that they were about to make was one of the most important decisions they would ever make, and it would affect Mr. Garcia for the rest of his life.
The jury didn't hang, and Garcia is serving the first of his 25-year sentence. But the jury is still out on the full impact of the 3 strikes law.
I think California, because it's such a big state, it has become the bellwether state for the rest of the country. So if something happens here and it's successful, it's going to be recreated in other states, and we're watching this very closely.
In California, crime rates are down since the 3 strikes law went into effect. Supporters of the 3 strikes say the new law is responsible. Opponents say it is too soon to tell. What is clear is that the new law is swelling a prison population already at twice its capacity. The Department of Corrections estimates that they will be forced to construct 20 new prisons over the next 10 years. At projected growth rates, it will cost Californians 1 out of every 5 tax dollars to house the prisoners. And what happens when 3 strikers like Anthony Garcia begin to age in prison? Louisiana's Angola Penitentiary gives us a hint of where we're headed.
Louisiana is in the forefront and has been for the past 20 years in the entire Get Tough move. In fact, Louisiana spearheaded it 20 years ago when it made life life. In the next 10 years, perhaps, this is going to be the world's biggest nursing home. And give it another 10 years, 10, 15 years, and you're going to have the world's biggest prison cemetery.
My cemetery is full. I had to build another cemetery because people are dying in prison while we have people on the streets that's killing people and all this. And something's wrong here. This lock them up and throw away the key is good in a way, and people want to do it, but let's be reasonable. We can't afford it. It's $45 a day to stay in this prison.
The first thing I don't care about is how much money we spend. If it costs $25,000 or $30,000 to isolate you from me, the lack of which will cause you to hit me over the head and put me in a coma, a vegetative state for the rest of my life, I'll happily pay the $25,000 or $30,000. And that bogus issue about, well, yes, you can send a kid to Harvard and Yale. We're not sending that kid to Harvard or Yale.
This is a gigantic human wasteland. It's a cemetery of sort for the living dead. That's what we all are. In a sense, we're dead. We just haven't lain down and pulled the ground over us yet.
The question is, when is society satisfied that the penalty that one person paid is sufficient? Well, who are you? Is your husband still in the ground buried? And once you've seen the many, many bodies, as I've seen, you know what the ultimate penalty should be.
I am the mother of a murder victim. My daughter was murdered. She was the first of 5 children.
I was in bed. I got the call on a Sunday morning at 4 o'clock in Jacksonville, Florida, from the police in Charleston, South Carolina. And they said they had found my son's truck torched on the side of the road.
I deserved some kind of justice. My daughter died in the 77th precinct of Los Angeles, and apparently they're always too busy to bother with victims.
You know, I wanted revenge. I wanted to see physical harm done to the individual. There were so many of those things. I wanted retaliation. I wanted payback. I was a fairly typical get-even type of mentality.
No more killing in my name. No more killing in hers.
There is nothing remarkable about wanting retribution for murder. Most in this group have felt that way. But what is remarkable about them is that they've moved beyond their anger. They are the murder victims' families for reconciliation.
I mean, we're the public. I've got blood on my hands through the murder of my son, and I don't want any more blood there. I don't want another parent to suffer the pain and the anguish of one of their loved ones being murdered. And that's what happens when an individual is put to death. There is a family that loses another child to murder.
Government's first duty is to protect its people. That's what I consider my first duty. And when you talk about the number of young adults killed, there is a requirement, really, that you seek the ultimate penalty. even if you don't get it, there has to be a signal out there that there's the potential that you will pay for your life.
There are a lot of Americans, a lot of prosecutors, there are a lot of people in our society who are comfortable with this idea that we're going to kill people because we feel like that's our right.
Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth! Kill him! Kill him!
And it's precisely that kind of eye for an eye mentality that has made us as violent as we are.
Now, I'm not going to kill you in cold blood. I am going to put you to death as a measure of retributive justice. And there is, I contend, nothing wrong with retributive justice. It is society saying that you will pay the ultimate penalty for taking a life.
How many times have you been in this room?
I've been in here twice, 2 times. It's confusing, it is, because 3 nights before my last execution, I had a murder. That's horrible. It's the only murder I've had. It's just horrible. And then 3 nights later, we go take one out of the cell and we go kill him, and that's okay. And I had to deal with that. I had to think about that. Now, what am I doing here? And then you have to just get back to the law of the land. You have to do a lot of, thought yourself, and you have to pray about it yourself, so you can do it.
From Angola to San Quentin, over 35 states now demand the death penalty for the most heinous crimes. But despite the laws and growing public support, the ambivalence in society remains. And in no time is the ambivalence more amplified than on the night of an execution.
You're going to take a man's life, you have to give him every opportunity to defend himself.
This man's had more than enough opportunities to defend himself. Did he give 14 children an opportunity to defend themselves?
And when he turns and sees this room, you're going to see panic attack. And then onto the table. Now, we do this real fast.
We need to feel safe, and he needs to die for what he did.
And this little pad here is such that your heels don't touch the table, because if your heels don't touch, you can't struggle with your legs.
The point is about whether the state should stoop to the level of a killer in response to his acts.
The witnesses are watching all this, and that's when you see fear in their face.
I've never watched a person die before, and I think that that's going to be a very strange experience.
Once they do that and they insert both veins, hook up the electrocardiogram.
My daughter Christina Appleton was murdered in '90 by a paroled, multiple murderer.
But then we wait for the 2 phones. One is to the governor's office, governor's mansion. The other one is to the Department of Corrections headquarters.
I believe you need to do away with these people, because the state doesn't manage to keep them away from the public.
When that clock gets to 12, and those 2 phones don't ring, then I can give the signal to go ahead with the execution. The wait was killing us all, me too. And he was just waiting here with his eyes, I said he slammed them shut. And then he was just waiting to see which breath was his last. And so I waited till 2 minutes after. And then I went ahead and gave the signal. They injected the chemicals, the drugs into the IV, and then he took 2 deep breaths. He went, phew, phew, exactly how he sounded. Then they take him out, and it's over. They got to go through it, I'm going to go through it with them. That's just the way I do it. It's not that I'm a zombie, and it's very moving. And that's the reason I think it should be televised. If you don't want to see it, turn your TV off. But people need to realize, the hoodlums, the predators on the street, that there is an execution. They need to see the fear in the man's face, as I saw it when I led him down the hall, and I saw fear grasp him.
Warden Burl Cain isn't alone in his call for televising executions. Some journalists contend that citizens have a right to witness executions carried out in their name. And if they get their way, it won't be the first time executions were open to the public. In colonial times, executions were morality plays intended for the entire community. The high point of the drama, more than the execution itself, was the final speech of the condemned.
If it's a really good speech from the gallows, it's also going to say that he's now found the Lord and that he's repented of his sins. This was a wonderful spectacle. It was not grisly, it was not exciting people's bloodlust. It was a dramatic, vivid concretization of their ideas that the sinner must be punished, but a sinner must also be brought to redemption through repentance.
Gradually, America tempered its use of capital punishment. In the early 19th century, many states in the new republic reduced their long list of capital crimes, including arson, burglary, and rape, down to one: murder. And the very nature of the execution changed as well.
Instead of it being seen as an edifying drama, it was looked now as a disgusting spectacle. The audience, as far as the respectable people conceived of it, in the 19th century city was a mob whose bloodlust, whose baser instincts would only be stimulated. And that was why the movement came to get it out of the public, move it indoors, first into the prison yard where people were hanged, but that wasn't a perfect solution. People would climb on roofs and up trees to watch. But in the 1880s, with the invention of the electric chair, that was a real advance. Because the electric chair allowed you to execute people deep in the bowels of the prison in a small chamber. And that really privatized public executions.
Today, most states have replaced their electric chairs with lethal injection tables, making executions not only private, but relatively painless as well. But for opponents of the death penalty, the clinical nature of today's executions masks a troubling fact. States are still killing people, a practice every other Western democratic nation has abandoned. But America's death row clock ticks much slower than it has ever before. State and federal courts require a complex appeals process that takes an average of 9 years before an execution can occur. At a time when most people have given up hope on society's criminals, there are still those who believe, as the Quakers did, that under the right circumstances, with the right commitment, the criminal cycle can be broken.
I need a charge press, please, fries.
A growing number of alternative sentencing facilities are trying to do just that by treating convicts outside of the prison system.
Well done, Greer, fries. I need a medium burger, fired.
One of the most successful programs is San Francisco's Delancey Street, best known for its resident-run restaurant and vocal director, Mimi Silbert.
I have lived for 25 years in Delancey Street. I've raised my children with these people, and there is no question that they are angry, vicious, violent, self-centered, self-destructive, antisocial people.
I had never worked before I came to Delancey Street. I didn't.
Never worked at all?
I never worked a day in my life. Not that I'm proud of it, but I just never did. I mean, I would get up and go steal or, rob or commit crimes, and that was kind of like my job.
It was just a revolving door constantly. I wouldn't listen to what nobody was saying. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was using drugs.
Our residents have an average of 18 felony convictions. That's an average of 18 strikes. They'd be doing 6 consecutive life sentences.
So it just cascaded from, group homes to boys' ranches to California Youth Authority till I turned 18 years old. When I turned 18 years old, I went right into the prison system.
That same antisocial, violent, vicious person can change. And if we're going to solve the problem of crime so that the next generation's children will not be killed, then we have to do something to turn around the lives of the people who are going to be the criminals.
As prisons become increasingly crowded, judges are offering more and more convicts alternative sentences, like 2 years at one of Delancey's 5 locations. Delancey's San Francisco facility, which houses 500 residents, has been running for over 25 years. They take no sex offenders. They prefer repeat felons whom all systems have failed.
First thing I learned was how to keep my mouth shut, I think. I was pretty opinionated. I wanted to express opinions that, didn't make a lot of sense because my best thoughts and my best opinions had gotten me about 15 to 16 years behind bars.
Every one of those 15 to 16 years cost taxpayers around $25,000. But at Delancey Street, Gerald Miller's sentence doesn't cost taxpayers a dime. It's paid for by the profit on his lattes and the profit on all of Delancey's other businesses.
Our largest training school is a moving school. It's like a joke if you think about it. We are the people who go into people's homes to pack their most valuable possessions and then move them from one home to another. And it is on our people to understand that this item that they used to think of as, oh, I can just steal this, now belongs to somebody that they talk to, and they begin to hear that person's problems, and they have to understand that it isn't as if the rest of the world has it made and they are the only victims.
What are you doing, Frank? Your homework?
I'm doing essays that I have to do for my literature classes.
Okay. How'd you do in an essay on friendship?
Did pretty good.
Did you?
Yeah, well, better than I expected, even though that I didn't feel as good.
Right.
I did not want to trust nobody. I did not want anybody in that could hurt me at all. But like a lot of things in Delancey Street, before you realize it, before you're able to stop these things, you already are. You already are starting to care for somebody.
In my mind, Delancey Street was a combination between an extended family and Harvard. I always compare us to Harvard. They go for the top 5% of the population. We just as snobbily and exclusively want the bottom 5% of the population. Their people stay an average of 4 years. Our people stay an average of 4 years.
And like Harvard, the degree of Delancey's success can be measured by how well it prepares its residents for life outside its walls.
I've done sales, I've done some warehouse stuff. I've even done security, which was like, really exciting for me because no one asked me ever in life, or I ever thought anyone would ever ask me to secure anything.
It used to be that the powerless, the underclass, the drug addicts, the criminals, the people who couldn't find a way in were the cynics. And now we're beginning to get a middle class that's cynical. That's horrible. This is our world to fix and to make better. And if we haven't found a way to make this hope translate into action, then we better work harder. Because that's all we've got.
America's definitions of crime continue to change. New methods of punishment and new attempts at reformation well up in response to changing times. Each generation leaves its legacy of choices, wise and foolish, to the next. If in our culture there are roots of rage and despair, there are still roots of promise and possibility. We nourish what we choose. and the choice is ours to make.
Since this documentary was completed, the California Supreme Court decided that judges must have the power to disregard prior convictions when sentencing third-time offenders. As a result, convicted three-strikers like Anthony Garcia can have their sentences reduced on appeal.